The hours crawled by, heavy and silent. He stayed alert, listening for every sound, prepared for anything. The night had become a turning point, a moment where fear met determination. And though exhaustion threatened to pull him under, he knew he could not give in. He had to be ready, had to be strong, had to face whatever was coming next. The night was far from over. And he understood that the discovery in the attic was only the beginning. The world outside his control had entered his life, and he could no longer pretend it was ordinary. He was awake now, fully aware of the threats around him, and ready to confront them, no matter how difficult the path ahead might be. He sat on the edge of the bed, flashlight still in hand, listening to the quiet hum of the house. The night had become heavier somehow, pressing in from every corner, filling him with tension he could not shake. The discovery in the attic replayed in his mind over and over: the torn box, scattered papers, the photograph of his child with the note. The words "you can't hide forever" echoed like a warning, each repetition tightening the knot of fear in his chest. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind against the windows made him flinch. He tried to remind himself that the house was old, that it had its own sounds. But logic offered little comfort against the weight of uncertainty. Someone had been here. He had seen the shadow. He had heard the scraping sounds. And the note had made it real, undeniable. He thought about what he should do next. Calling the police seemed logical, but he hesitated. How could he explain it without sounding crazy? There was no forced entry. No one was in the house now. Only the evidence of their presence remained, and even that was subtle, almost invisible. Still, he could not ignore it. Not with his child sleeping upstairs. Determination began to replace some of the fear. He had to act, had to protect his child, had to uncover what was happening. He could not wait passively for danger to return. He needed a plan, a way to face the unknown without panicking. His mind raced, listing possibilities, weighing actions. Should he stay awake and monitor the house? Should he search for clues? Or should he find someone to help? He decided he would start by making the house safer. He checked all the doors and windows, double-checking the locks, even the ones he never normally worried about. Each click of a lock sounded unusually loud in the quiet night, giving him a small sense of control. He pulled curtains tighter, ensuring no one could see inside from the outside. His hands were steady now, not from calmness, but from a necessity born of fear. Next, he thought about the attic. That had been the point of the first real confrontation with the unknown. If someone had been there, they could come again. He needed to secure it, but also to understand what had happened. He returned to the attic door, feeling the chill of the air against his skin. The lock was old, but it still functioned. He double-locked it and made a mental note to buy a stronger lock in the morning. It was not much, but it was something. He spent the next hour walking through the house, checking rooms, closets, corners. Every sound made him startle. Every shadow seemed to move just slightly. Yet, with each pass, he became more aware of the patterns, more confident in his movements. Fear was still there, but it no longer controlled him entirely. He was preparing himself, sharpening his instincts, training his mind to face whatever might come. Then, a sudden thought struck him. What if the person who had left the note had been watching him for days, maybe even weeks? Could they know his routines, his schedule, the times he was least vigilant? The idea made his stomach churn. He had always believed his home was a safe haven, but now it felt fragile, vulnerable. The very place that had been his sanctuary seemed infiltrated. The walls seemed to close in around him. He returned to his child's room, sitting on the floor next to the bed. The chest rose and fell steadily, a reminder of innocence and trust. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from the small face, feeling both love and fierce protectiveness. This was why he could not fail. This was why he could not let fear paralyze him. His child depended on him, and that dependence gave him strength he had not realized he possessed. Hours passed. The night stretched on endlessly, each minute heavy with uncertainty. He made small checks, small preparations. He moved objects that could be used for defense closer at hand, set up a flashlight in the living room for quick access, and made mental notes about how he would respond to various situations. The unknown was still there, lurking. but he had begun to reclaim a sense of control. In the early hours, as the first hints of light began to creep through the curtains, he sat by the window, thinking. He realized that the night had changed him. Fear had pushed him to his limits, but it had also awakened a determination he had never fully recognized. He had faced something incomprehensible and had not fled. He had stayed, observed, prepared. The night had tested him. He had endured. The thought of daylight brought a small sense of relief, but he knew the threat was not gone. Whoever had left the note was out there, somewhere possibly watching, waiting, but he would no longer be a passive participant in his own life. He would be vigilant, cautious, and ready. The night had forced him into action, and he would continue to act. He allowed himself a brief moment of rest, leaning back against the windowsill. Sleep would not come easily, but the house seemed quieter now, almost peaceful. The shadows felt less menacing in the weak light, the air less oppressive. He could feel the tension in his body easing slightly, replaced by a determination to face the day and continue uncovering the truth as the sun rose. Painting the sky with soft colors, he finally let himself breathe. The night had been long, filled with fear and uncertainty, but it had also revealed his strength, his ability to confront the unknown, and his unwavering commitment to protect his child. The discovery in the attic had changed everything, but he knew he would not allow it to define him. He would face the consequences, uncover the truth, and ensure the safety of his home and his child. The night had been a test, and he had passed. But the journey was far from over. The first morning light filled the room with a soft, warm glow, yet it brought little comfort. The night had left its mark on him, a mix of exhaustion and a strange alertness that refused to let him relax. He rose from the bed slowly, muscles stiff and body heavy, but a determination burned quietly within him. Today he would take steps he had never imagined taking before the night had unfolded. He began with practical things. Locks were checked again, windows double-checked, and anything that could be moved or used for protection was placed within easy reach. His home, which had felt vulnerable and invaded the night before, began to feel like something he could reclaim. Each action restored a small piece of control, a small sense of power over a situation that had seemed completely beyond him. He moved quietly through the house, careful not to disturb the child still sleeping upstairs. He thought about what had happened in the attic, about the note, the photograph, and the shadow he had seen. The questions weighed on him, heavy and relentless. Who had come into his home? How had they known so much? Why had they left without taking anything? Every possibility seemed more frightening than the last. Yet he refused to give in to panic. His thoughts turned to the child, the center of his world. Protecting them had been the driving force through the night, the reason he had stayed alert and faced the fear that had gripped him. The sight of their peaceful, sleeping face had been both a comfort and a call to action. Nothing could be allowed to harm that. Nothing could be left to chance. He made a decision. He would not face this alone. The police could offer guidance, and he would document everything: the sounds, the shadows, the note, the torn box in the attic. Even if some of it seemed irrational, evidence would give him a foundation to act. He carefully placed the photograph and the note into an envelope, along with a small log of events from the night. Every detail mattered. After securing the evidence, he considered the next step. He could not simply live in fear. He needed to understand the threat to find answers. Perhaps someone he trusted could help. A neighbor, a friend, anyone who might assist in assessing the situation without compromising his child's safety. But he knew caution was essential. Not everyone could be trusted, and this situation required careful planning. He paused at the living room window, looking out at the street bathed in morning light. The world outside moved on as if nothing had happened. Cars passed, people walked, life continued normally. And yet inside his home, the night's events had changed everything. He felt a shift within himself, a realization that his life could not be the same as before. Safety was no longer guaranteed. Vigilance had to become routine. The child awoke shortly after, rubbing their eyes and yawning. He forced a smile, a small gesture to mask the lingering anxiety. They had no idea of the night's events, of the fear, the shadow, the note, the uncertainty. Their trust in him was complete, and he vowed to protect it, to shield them from the knowledge until he could ensure safety. The house was quiet in the way only late nights could be. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that made every small sound feel louder than it should be. A single light stayed on in the living room, casting a weak yellow glow across the floor. Toys lay scattered near the couch, small reminders of a child who had finally fallen asleep after asking for one more story. One more hug, one more promise that everything would be okay. He sat at the small dining table, shoulders bent forward, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. His hands were rough, marked by years of work that never seemed to pay enough. He counted the numbers again, even though he already knew the result. It was never enough. Rent, school supplies, food, electricity. Every month felt like a fight he barely survived. Being a single father was not something he had planned. Life had taken a sharp turn years ago, and since then, everything had rested on his shoulders alone. He rarely complained. There was no one to complain to. Friends drifted away, family lived far, and pride kept him silent. He did what needed to be done day after day. That evening had been long. He had worked extra hours, his body aching as he walked home in the cold. Dinner was simple. A few laughs with his child helped ease the stress, but once bedtime came, the weight returned. After the bedroom door closed, reality rushed back in. He pushed the bills aside and leaned back in his chair. His eyes burned with tiredness, but sleep felt far away. His mind kept replaying the same worries. What if he lost his job? What if something happened to him? Who would take care of his child then? He stood up slowly, joints stiff, and walked through the living room. He picked up the toys from the floor, placing them in a worn box near the wall. He did this every night, a small routine that gave him a sense of order when everything else felt out of control. As he moved toward the hallway, something caught his attention. At first, he thought nothing of it. Just a feeling, maybe. He paused, standing still, listening. The house made its usual noises. Pipes settling. Wind brushing against the windows. He shook his head and continued walking. Tired minds imagine things, he told himself. In the bathroom, he splashed cold water on his face. The mirror showed a man older than his years. Lines around his eyes, shadows beneath them. Still, when he smiled faintly, he could see the same strength that had carried him this far. He turned off the light and walked toward his bedroom. Before entering, he checked on his child, as he always did. The small chest rose and fell steadily. The blanket was pulled up too high, so he gently lowered it, careful not to wake them. For a moment, he stood there, watching, feeling both love and fear at the same time. He closed the door softly and stepped into his own room. It was simple. A bed, a small dresser, and a window that faced the street. He changed quickly and lay down, staring at the ceiling. Sleep did not come easily. Minutes passed. Maybe more. He wasn't sure. His thoughts drifted between memories and worries until a faint sound broke through. It was soft. Almost too soft to notice. He froze. At first he thought it came from outside. A passing car, maybe? He held his breath and listened. The sound came again. A light scrape. Then silence. His heart beat faster. He turned his head toward the door, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond it. The house felt different now. The quiet had changed. It felt heavy, like something unseen was pressing against the walls. He stayed still, telling himself not to overreact. Old houses made strange sounds. He had lived here long enough to know that. Still, something about this felt off. Another sound followed, this time closer. He sat up slowly, careful not to make noise. His feet touched the cold floor, and he winced at the chill. He waited, listening again. Nothing. His mind raced. Should he check? Or was it better to stay put? Thoughts of his child flashed through his mind. That decided it. No matter how tired or afraid he felt, he had to be sure. He stood and walked toward the door, every step measured. He opened it just enough to look into the hallway, Darkness filled the space, broken only by the faint glow from the living room light he had forgotten to turn off. The hallway looked normal. Too normal. He stepped out, his bare feet silent against the floor. He moved slowly, stopping every few steps to listen. His breath sounded loud in his ears. As he reached the living room, he noticed something small but strange. One of the toys he had placed in the box earlier was now on the floor. He frowned. He was sure he had picked them all up. He bent down and picked it up, holding it in his hand. A chill ran through him. He looked around the room, scanning every corner. The windows were closed. The door was locked. He told himself it must have fallen out of the box. Still, his hand shook slightly as he placed it back. He turned off the light and stood there in the darkness, listening again. For a moment, there was nothing. His shoulders relaxed just a little. Then he heard it. A faint sound from inside the house. Not outside. Not the walls inside. His body went stiff. His heart pounded so hard he was sure it could be heard. The sound came again, slow and deliberate. He couldn't move. Every instinct told him to run, to shout, to grab his child and get out. But his legs refused to respond. Fear wrapped around him, heavy and tight. He stood there, trapped between disbelief and dread. Realizing that this night was not like the others, something was wrong, and whatever it was closer than he wanted to believe. He stayed still, every muscle tight, trying to tell himself it was nothing. The sound came again, a soft scrape against the floor, deliberate and slow. It was not the wind. It was not the house settling. This was something alive, moving inside his home. His mind raced, thinking of all the possibilities, none of them comforting. Slowly, he forced himself to take a step forward. The cold floor bit at his bare feet, but he ignored it. He crept toward the hallway, every nerve on edge. The living room was quiet now, but he knew the silence was dangerous. The kind of silence that hides things you don't want to see. He reached the hallway and stopped, straining to hear anything. Another sound came, closer this time. It was soft, almost like someone dragging their hand along the wall. His heart thumped in his chest so loudly he thought it would give him away. He wanted to call out, to yell, but his voice stuck in his throat. His child was upstairs, asleep. The thought made his chest tighten. He could not let anything happen. He needed to know what was happening before it could get worse. He moved slowly down the hallway, eyes scanning the shadows. The dim light from the living room barely reached the corners. Each shadow seemed alive, and he had to force himself not to jump at every little movement. He remembered the doors were all locked. The windows, too. Nothing could get in. And yet, the sound kept coming. He paused near the kitchen. There it was again. A soft, deliberate scrape coming from the far corner. He clenched his fists, fighting the panic that wanted to take over. His breathing was shallow, but he forced himself to stay quiet. One step at a time, he edged closer. The source of the sound was near the pantry. The faint outline of a box moved slightly, as if something underneath it was shifting. He froze, unsure whether to call out or approach. But fear would not move him. He had to know. Slowly he reached out and lifted the box. Nothing moved. He looked behind it. Nothing. His heart slowed for a moment, relief washing over him. Maybe it was just his imagination. Maybe he was just too tired, too stressed, letting his mind play tricks. Then a shadow moved at the edge of his vision. A small figure crouched low, almost invisible in the dark. He blinked, and it was gone. His stomach dropped. He had seen it. There was no question. Something, someone, had been in the house. Adrenaline surged through him. He felt every ache in his body at once, but he could not stop. He needed to find out what it was. The thought of leaving his child alone upstairs was unbearable. He could not abandon them, not even for a moment. He moved cautiously, checking every corner of the kitchen. Cabinets, drawers, behind the refrigerator, nothing. It was as if whoever or whatever had been there had vanished into thin air. And yet the feeling lingered. The weight of it pressed against him, heavy and unrelenting. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He needed a plan. Panic would not help. He could not just stand there forever. He could grab something to defend himself if necessary. His eyes fell on a knife block on the counter. He picked one, holding it tightly, feeling the cold metal against his palm. The house was silent again, but he knew it would not last. He could feel it. Something had changed. The air felt thicker, heavier, like it was waiting for him to move. He slowly moved toward the stairs, each step measured. The scrape had stopped, but the sense of presence remained. He glanced back at the kitchen, then at the hallway. Nothing. Yet he could not shake the feeling that someone was watching him. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, he paused. The soft creak of the wooden steps under his feet sounded louder than anything else. He held the knife tightly, knuckles white. Each step upward felt like an eternity. His body frozen between fear and duty. He reached the landing and looked into the hallway leading to his child's room. All was quiet. The small chest rose and fell steadily, a comforting sight in the dark. He exhaled slowly, relief mixing with lingering fear. He checked the door handle, locked. Good. He gently lifted the blanket, careful not to wake them. The sight of their peaceful face made him feel a wave of determination. Whoever or whatever had been in the house would not get near them. Not tonight. As he moved back toward his own room, he thought about what he had seen. The shadow, the scrape, the moving box. It did not make sense. There was no logical explanation. Yet, he could not ignore it. Something was happening in his house. Something he did not understand. He closed his door and leaned against it, trying to calm himself. His hands still shook, heart still racing. He felt drained, exhausted beyond words. But he could not sleep. Not yet. He had to make sure everything was safe before he could even think about rest. He decided to check the living room once more. Each step toward it felt heavier, the fear building with every movement. He turned on the light, scanning the room carefully. Everything appeared normal. The toys were in their box. The floor was empty. The shadows seemed to retreat, but the feeling remained. That sense of being watched, of something not right, lingered in the corners. He could not explain it. He could not ignore it. And yet, he felt powerless to act. He stood there for a long moment, listening. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. He wanted to tell himself it was all in his head. He wanted to believe he was imagining things, letting stress and fatigue play tricks on him. But deep down, he knew that was not true. The night stretched on, slow and heavy. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind, made him jump. He checked the locks, the doors, the windows. Everything was secure. Yet he could not shake the feeling that someone had been there, and might still be. He finally returned to his bedroom, sitting on the edge of his bed. The knife lay on the nightstand beside him, a small comfort. His body ached, but sleep would not come. His mind replayed every detail, every sound, every shadow. He realized he had to stay awake, to be alert. He could not risk ignoring the signs. His child's safety depended on him. And so, he waited, listening, watching, ready for whatever might come next. The night was far from over. And he knew this was only the beginning of something he did not yet understand. The night seemed endless, stretching out with a heaviness that pressed against him from every side. He sat on the edge of his bed, the knife still within reach, and tried to calm his racing mind. Every sound made him flinch. The floor creaked as the house settled, or maybe as something moved within it. He could no longer tell the difference. The shadows in the corners seemed to pulse, live with the unknown. He thought about the shadow he had seen earlier, crouched near the kitchen. The memory made his skin prickle. It was not a child, not a pet, nothing he could recognize. It had been deliberate, purposeful, and it had disappeared too quickly. He had to find out what it was, even if fear rooted him to the spot. Slowly he rose and moved toward the living room again. The dim glow from the streetlights outside barely illuminated the space. He walked cautiously, listening for any sign of movement. His bare feet made almost no sound on the floor, but his heart seemed to echo with every step. The toys were back in the box, everything in place. yet he could feel the presence of something he could not see. He walked past the hallway, toward the room where he kept extra supplies. The scrape had not returned, but he felt the tension lingering, like a cord stretched tight, ready to snap. He opened the door slowly, scanning the shelves, the boxes, the corners. Everything seemed ordinary, yet he could not shake the sense that something had been disturbed, that something had left a trace. He picked up a small flashlight from the shelf and turned it on, the beam cutting through the darkness. Dust floated in the light, tiny motes dancing in the air, and he blinked, shaking his head to clear it. He walked along the hallway with the flashlight, pointing it at every shadow, every corner, every door. Nothing moved. Nothing appeared, and yet the feeling persisted. Something had been here, and he could not ignore it. He stopped near the stairs, peering up into the darkness above. The landing was empty. His child slept peacefully. He exhaled slowly, the sound shaky, and forced himself to focus. Then, a faint noise came from the attic. He froze instantly. His mind raced. The attic was locked, a place he rarely went, filled with old furniture, boxes, and memories of his life before being alone. No one had a reason to be there. No one should be there. He felt a wave of determination mixed with fear. He had to see. He could not leave the question unanswered. If someone had entered the house, they could be anywhere. His child's safety depended on him knowing what was happening. He found the key to the attic in a small drawer he had used for extra locks. His hands shook as he inserted it into the rusty lock. It took effort, but the lock clicked open. He pulled the door, and the stairs to the attic creaked under his weight. Every sound felt amplified, echoing through the house. He climbed slowly, the flashlight illuminating dust-covered boxes and old furniture. The air smelled stale, a mixture of forgotten memories and the must of a place untouched for years. He shone the light around, looking for any sign of life, any clue of what had caused the strange noises. The attic seemed empty at first, but then he noticed something unusual. One of the boxes was slightly open, a corner torn. It was not the way he had left it. He knelt down, carefully peering inside. Old papers, photographs, and trinkets were scattered. Some had fallen to the floor. His breath caught. He remembered leaving these boxes neatly stacked, sealed, and undisturbed. As he lifted one of the papers, his hands trembled. It was a photograph of his child, taken recently, tucked in a small envelope. A note was written in hurried handwriting, words that made his blood run cold. It said, "You can't hide forever." He dropped the paper, stumbling backward. The flashlight fell to the floor, rolling slightly, casting erratic beams across the attic. Panic surged through him, making his body shake uncontrollably. How could someone have been here? Who could know about him and his child? He wanted to run, to get his child and leave immediately, but he forced himself to stay. He needed to think, to plan. Fear could not control him now. He took a deep breath and tried to calm his racing thoughts. Whoever had entered the attic had left, but their presence was real, undeniable. He had to find out more before he could feel safe. He noticed the attic window was slightly ajar. A chill wind blew in, making the shadows flicker. Could someone have climbed in from outside? Or had they been inside the house all along? The questions pressed on him, heavy and relentless. He checked the rest of the attic carefully. Moving boxes, shining the flashlight into every dark corner. Nothing else seemed out of place. No sign of the intruder remained. It was as if they had vanished into thin air, leaving only the note as proof of their presence. He sank to the floor, exhausted, and tried to collect his thoughts. The night had changed in an instant. He had gone from a quiet, ordinary evening to a night filled with uncertainty, fear, and the realization that his home was no longer safe. His mind spun with possibilities, none of them comforting. He thought about calling the police, but hesitation stopped him. What would he say? There was no intruder now, no signs of forced entry, only a note and a sense of being watched. They might not believe him. He had to find a way to protect his child without drawing unnecessary attention. Minutes passed. The house seemed to settle again, but he could not shake the feeling of eyes on him. He knew the night was far from over. He had seen the shadow, heard the scrapes, found the note. Whatever had happened would not leave him untouched. It would follow him until he uncovered the truth. He stood, leaving the attic behind, locking the door carefully. Every sound of the house seemed sharper as he descended the stairs. The living room looked peaceful in the faint light, the toys in their box, the furniture in place. Yet he knew nothing would feel the same again. Back in his bedroom, he checked on his child once more. The small chest rose and fell steadily, a comforting rhythm in the dark. He pulled the blanket closer around them, a protective gesture, even though the danger might not be immediate. He sat on the edge of the bed, flashlight in hand, trying to make sense of the night. The discovery in the attic had shaken him, left him frozen with fear and disbelief. Whoever had been there knew him, knew his home, knew his child. And the note had made it clear they were not finished. Sleep was impossible. He could not rest, not with the weight of the discovery pressing down. He thought about the future, the safety of his child, and the steps he would have to take to uncover the truth. The night had revealed a world he had never imagined, a reality where he could no longer ignore the dangers that lurked in what should have been the safety of his home. Breakfast was simple, quiet, and comforting. It was a small act of normalcy in the midst of upheaval. He answered questions, engaged in small conversation, and watched for any signs of distress, both in the child and in himself. Eating together grounded them, creating a momentary island of peace in the otherwise unsettled world. Once the child was occupied with drawing, he returned to the attic. The torn box and scattered papers still sat where he had left them. The note and photograph were gone, safely secured elsewhere. He examined the contents carefully, looking for clues for anything that might explain the intruder's presence or intentions. Old letters, photographs, and papers filled the boxes, remnants of a life before being a single parent. None of it explained the intrusion, but the act of investigation gave him a sense of control, a step toward understanding the unknown. Hours passed in a mix of planning and observation. He devised routines to check the house discreetly, placing items strategically, noting every sound, every shadow, and every movement. He realized that fear, while powerful, could be transformed into vigilance. Each preparation, each careful step, gave him strength. He would not be paralyzed by the unknown, would confront it. Later in the day, he made a call to the authorities, carefully explaining the situation, providing the evidence he had collected, and requesting guidance. The officer listened attentively, asked questions, and promised to conduct a patrol in the area. It was not a complete solution, but it was a beginning, a way to assert that he was not helpless, that he had taken concrete steps to protect himself and his child as the evening approached. He felt a cautious sense of accomplishment. The night had been a trial, a confrontation with fear and uncertainty, but he had emerged with clarity and purpose. He realized that strength was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. His vigilance had preserved safety, his quick thinking had prevented panic, and his determination had transformed a night of terror into a foundation for resilience. When the child went to bed that night, he stayed nearby, reading softly until they fell asleep, watching the rise and fall of the small chest with a sense of profound responsibility. The night had tested him in ways he had never imagined, but he had faced it, endured it, and emerged stronger. As he finally lay down himself, exhaustion pulling at him, he understood that life would never be exactly the same. The intrusion, the shadow, the note, they had changed the landscape of his existence. But they had also revealed his courage, his resourcefulness, and the depth of his love. He closed his eyes, not in fear, but in quiet determination, ready to face whatever came next with the knowledge that he had survived, learned, and grown. Morning would bring new challenges, new decisions, and perhaps new fears. Yet he was no longer the man who had gone to bed the night before. He was alert, prepared, and aware. The night had been long, the discovery profound, but it had not broken him. Instead, it had awakened a strength he had always possessed, strength that would carry him forward. Protecting the life he cherished most and facing the unknown with resolve and courage,